Hello 10th graders and welcome to the lesson. In the last class, you have studied about the relative clauses or the relative pronouns. Who, which, when, where, whose, and that. You have studied that we use who to talk about people, where to talk about places, which to talk about things, and we can replace that to talk about people instead of who, and to talk about things instead of which. And we also use when to talk about times, and whose for positions. In today's class, you're going to study about two types of relative clauses. So we have two types of relative clauses. The first type is the defining relative clause, and the second type is the non-defining relative clause. Students' book, page 68, 69. So let's begin with the defining relative clauses. We use the defining relative clauses to give essential information about the person or things in the main clause. What do we mean by essential information? It means it identify the noun clearly. So essential means it identify the noun more clearly. They make it clear which person or thing we are talking about. Let's study these examples so that you can have a better understanding of the defining relative clause. The first sentence: the man who is standing is my brother. So in this clause or in this sentence, this is the defining relative clause, who is standing. And it defines or identify the noun, which is the man. It identify or defines the noun, which is, in this sentence, the man. It's making it very clear that the man who is standing is my brother. Let's look at the second example. Children who hate chocolate are uncommon. So this sentence right here, who hate chocolate, it defines or identify the noun, which is children. In the third example, let's go to a country where the sun always shines. And also in this sentence, this clause, the sun always shines, identify the noun, which is, in this sentence, country. So we can't use commas in defining relative clauses. As you can see in these sentences, there are no commas. So we don't use commas. And we can't omit or delete anything in this sentence. It will change the meaning. But sometimes we can omit the relative pronoun when there is. In defining relative clauses, you can omit the relative pronouns when they are the object of the relative clause. But you can omit who, which, that, where, and when. But you can't omit whose, because whose is always the subject. You can only omit who, which, where, when, and that when they are the object of the relative clause. Let's look at these examples. The customer who I called was very happy. So in this sentence, or in this clause, you can see that after the relative pronoun who, there is a subject and a verb. This is how you know that it's the object of the clause. When there is a subject plus a verb after the relative pronoun, so the relative pronoun is the object of the clause. So in this example, as we say, you can tell that it's the object because it is followed by another subject and a verb. So let's rewrite this clause and omit the relative pronoun who. The customer I called was very happy. In both of these sentences, the customer who I called was very happy and the customer I called was very happy, even if we have omitted the relative pronoun. The two examples, they are the same meaning and there is no difference. Let's look at the second example. He is eating the sandwich that you made. So this is the subject and this is the verb, and the relative pronoun that is the object of the clause. It's not the subject. You know that because it is followed by a subject and a verb. So I'm going to rewrite it, omitting that. He is eating the sandwich you made. So in both these examples, the relative pronouns or the relative pronoun is the object of the clause. When the relative pronoun is the subject of the clause, it cannot be omitted. It's compulsory. If it is the subject of the clause, you cannot omit the relative pronoun. Let's take a look at these examples. The customer who called me was angry. So in this example, who is the subject of the relative clause. How do you know that? Because it is followed by a verb and there is no subject, no other subject in the clause. So who is the subject? Because it is followed by a verb. You can't write the customer called me was angry. You can't omit who, or that, which, where, or when. Let's look at the second example. The woman that spoke at the meeting was very knowledgeable. Also, here, that is the subject of the clause because it is followed by a verb. This is how you realize it is a subject. When it is followed by another subject and a verb, it is the object and you can omit them. But when they are followed by a verb, they are a subject and you can't omit the relative pronouns. The second type of relative clauses is the non-defining relative clauses. So, what do you mean by non-defining relative clauses? Non-defining relative clauses, they give more information about the noun. So that's why do we use them, to give more information about the noun. Let's look at this example. Claire, who I work with, is doing a marathon this year. So in this sentence or in this example, this is the non-defining relative clause, which is who I work with. So who I work with is the non-defining relative clause, and it is who I work with. And so this non-defining relative clause gives us more information about Claire. Claire is the noun. And it is not necessary to define or identify Claire. So non-defining relative clauses, they don't define or identifying nouns. It is not important because there is only one Claire that I work with. That's why it is not necessary. And if you can notice, we use commas. Here's a comma. There are 2 commas in this example. So we use commas when writing non-defining relative clauses. It's very important. If we delete the non-defining relative clause, the sentence will be correct. Claire is doing a marathon this year. That's it for our lesson today. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.